Hi, I'm Jack Berry, and I'm at the West Michigan Golf Show, and the most colorful bunch in this whole show is from Maple Hill Golf, and they are brightening the winter day, and here they all are. Look at that. What an array. I mean, have you ever seen John John Daly is having a fit that he can't get all this.
Shot. If I do this, well, the owner said he'd give me another 50. If I would stay with the...
Hi, I'm Jack Berry. I'm at the West Michigan Golf Show. We'll be talking about Jim Flick, who is one of the finest teachers of the game, and although he was born in Indiana, went to Wake Forest on a basketball scholarship, he became one heck of a golf professional, of a teacher, and nobody knows better about that than the two gentlemen with me, Terry Moore and Brian O'Neill, who is very connected with this show. He started it back about 25 years ago, and had a real good relationship with Jim. Talk about that a little bit, Terry.
Well, thanks to Boyne and working with Carolyn Alt, we were able to bring in Jim Flick several years ago. And the best thing I like about Jim, not only was just such a great guy and all this legend as a teacher, but when I grew up, I really didn't like my name Terry, because we had girls in the class named Terry. So I always used to say, well, there's some famous Terry Moore. There's this baseball player. Well, nobody in my class knew about this baseball player. So, but I tried that out because everybody knew about Terry Moore, the actress. But the first time I met Jim Flick, I introduced myself. He says, well, I'm always going to remember you, Terry. You're the name of the favorite baseball player for the St. Louis Cardinals. He was my favorite baseball player. And so, oh man, I've hit the right guy. And Jim always remembered Terry Moore, St. Louis Cardinals, who, by the way, was one of Stan Musial's good friends. Stan just passed away recently. Jim listened to St. Louis Cardinal baseball in the summer, being from Indiana. You know, they had Harry Carey, and that big was it WKMOX was the radio station?
KMOX, right?
There you go.
St. Louis, right?
So yeah. He listened to St. Louis Cardinals. So I said, this is my type of guy. You know, Jim Flick's going to remember Terry Moore. He doesn't know anything about the golf show or Michigan Golfer, but he remembers Terry Moore, the name. So, but I think I was most impressed with Jim, and I think Brian would say the same, is that, you know, when you have somebody of that stature be such a down-to-earth gentleman. He just was very polite, very considerate. And, you know, when I ask people to do all these interviews and come to this show, it can be sometimes it can be a little testy, because they got to do a number of radio interviews, and he asked them to do television. I never saw any impatience for Jim.
Hi, this is Terry Moore representing Michigan Golfer TV with our special guest today, legendary golf instructor Jim Flick. Well, Jim, welcome to Grand Rapids.
Thank you very much, Terry.
Thank you for coming from Arizona in the warm confines of the desert to Grand Rapids, Michigan. And I know we're real proud to have you as the headliner for the West Michigan Golf Show. Jim, the first question I got to ask you, you told me the other day a little bit of trivia that not even Ken Jennings from Jeopardy might know. And that is, your roommate at Wake Forest, from what you told me, you were a basketball scholarship winner at Wake Forest. Who was your roommate that freshman year?
Well, my freshman year was a man named Charlie Kirsch and Jack Mueller, but I did room with Arnold my junior year for about 4 months. We both had roommates killed in an automobile accident, and so Arnold took his roommate's body home, and I did the same. And when we returned, we roomed together, and then Arnold joined the Coast Guard. The accident was in October, and Arnold joined the Coast Guard in February.
And, you know, and I think that's a mark of a good teacher, patience. You think about some of the swings these guys have to deal with, and probably the same things they have to deal with people. Jim just had tremendous patience and understanding of human nature. So it was a real joy to work with when he came to the golf show.
Well, the thing about Jim was he wasn't looking for the perfect swing. He was a feel man. And Brian, you certainly were connected to that. Tell us a little bit about it.
Yeah, Terry, you hit the nail right on the head there, you know, as it relates to Jim and the kind of person that he was, you know, a real people person. And I feel very fortunate to have been able to spend a large portion of my career with him. And, you know, he was a field person. You know, he taught the game through what your only contact with the golf club was, that was your hands. He taught you how to hit golf shots, shape golf shots. He made it fun. Okay, being a down-to-earth person that, you know, a lot of these teachers have big egos, and it's an uncomfortable situation a lot of times for students to, you know, be learning from such an icon. And I can tell you, Jim made it fun for the people. It was always a fun environment. That's something that he taught me over the years as, you know, my mentor. And what a great person. And you know, the golf industry is without question at a big loss here with him being gone.
Each of you, thanks for being here this morning. The way I like to teach is I like to explore your mind a little bit and have you do some inventory, because golf is a trial and error process for each of us to go through. As we try things, we find out what works for us. There's no magic formula. Nothing works. The same thing does not work for everybody.
Well, he was in the professional Hall of Fame, PGA Professional Hall of Fame. He's been in about every Hall of Fame you can think of. And my first memory of him was at the Tradition, Jack Nicklaus's first big shot as a senior, and it was at Desert Mountain, which is a course that Jack designed, and out in Scottsdale. And Jack was having a few little problems, and they're come walking up like the 18th hole together, and talking back and forth, and this was after Jack Grout, who was Jack's longtime teacher, had passed on, and he was looking for some help, and Jim provided it for how many years they had a golf show together, or a golf a golf academy together.
And then Mr. Grout, of course, was coaching Jack at that time and died in about, I think it was 1988. In the fall of '88, and Jack was kind of going through a number of guys to find somebody that he felt he wanted to trust his game with. And he came to the Tradition in 1990 to play his first senior tournament. And he was working with a teaching professional, had him trying to clear his hips and do a lot of things that were not in concert with how Mr. Grout had taught him, and Jack was really struggling. I had watched Mr. Grout teach Jack for a number of years and knew exactly how he approached things, so I just did nothing more than give Jack the same lessons that Mr. Grout gave him. And he won the tournament, went to Augusta and finished fifth the next week, and he called me and asked me to put together the golf school program for him, which we did for about almost 10 years, Nicholas Flick Schools.
So he was in his Michigan connection. He had a home up at Boyne Highlands.
Yeah, he actually, back in the day when they were doing the Golf Digest schools, Boyne was one of the home bases for the Golf Digest school. And I remember as a kid, you know, I was the range rat guy that set up the chairs and the balls for the golf school. And, you know, if the chairs weren't just right, Jim would get after me, but he showed me how to do it, how he wanted it. And there was Martin Hall, Mike Malaska, all these big names now were all part of that school. And, you know, it's neat to look back and see how many wonderful instructors, top shelf instructors, Jim has mentored along the way. And, you know, he had a home in Petoskey. He loved northern Michigan. It was his home away from, you know, the desert. So he talked about that tournament, you know, at the Tradition there with Jack a lot. That was one of his fondest memories. And he would always tell me, Brian, I've been really lucky. I've been really lucky. I don't know how it all happened, but I've been really lucky. And, you know, I felt really lucky to be able to spend the time I had with Jim as well. And he has really helped my career tremendously. So
there's different degrees of application of all the principles, and I am going to start out by asking you to do some inventory about how you approach the game. Number one, I'm going to have Brian make a couple of swings here for us. I'm going to ask you, do you try to swing the club and make your swing go up to the top? Go ahead and make a swing for us there, Brian. And you swing the club and let that turn your body.
Well, he deserved it. He was a guy. He gave lessons all the time. That was it. He wasn't a club pro, you know, selling shirts and socks and so forth. He was teaching the game and working with what you had.
You know, and also I think on top of what Brian was saying, another hallmark of a great teacher is being a communicator. You know, Brian, and I think you would agree. And the communication is such that how they can distill concepts of golf and swing and get it into a simplified, everyday language. Jim's just a natural communicator. He just had a way to, and also make people feel ease when they're talking about golf. A lot of people have a lot of anxiety, but I could see if you were on the practice range with Jim Flick, you know, you'd feel comfortable with this guy. This is your ultimate grandfather, your ultimate uncle. But good teachers, and I've seen this with Brian and Jason Gus, they're good communicators. They have to distill words and concepts in a simplified form, but also do it in such a way you feel comfortable. And Jim Flick had that ability. He's just a good guy, but he was a very strong communicator.
Exactly. I mean, different words mean different things to different people, and it's for a teacher to have the right connection is a great talent.
You know, I remember, you know, Jim was 82 when he passed away, and when I started working with him, that was probably 15 years ago or so, when technology was really getting rolled out and introduced, you know, in golf learning and coaching with these high-speed video cameras and all this software. And Jim came to me one day, and I, of course, being younger, I bought that thing right away. And he says, "Brian, what the heck is that?" And I said, "Well, it's a computer, and we take video, and we're, you know, writing lines and looking at, you know, the positions." And he's like, he goes, I don't understand that. You know, you're going to have your student looking at that and be so darn focused on what they look like, they're going to forget to look at the golf shot and the shape of the ball and the trajectory and all that. He says, that's how you got to, you know, learn to teach, is from watching the golf ball. And you know, I get goosebumps thinking about that, you know. And a few days later, he comes to me, he goes, "Now, do you think I should get one of those?" He said, "I need to keep up with the times, don't I?" And I said, "Jim, yeah, I think you need to get one." And of course, he got one. He had no idea how to run the darn thing, and I spent half of my time teaching him and running it for him. But that was a neat moment that we had.
He was better without it.
Yeah, he really was. He really was.
That's the way a lot of us feel about computers. Terry, anything to add?
Well, I just when I think about Jim Flick, I think that how he was able to sustain such a terrific career over several generations. You know, he really talking about starting the game, and I remember, I believe his dad was a good player. I think he won the local amateur championship. So, you know, he probably was taught by his dad, and then he imparted that. Then I think became a pro in Cincinnati. Club pro, correct?
That's correct.
Right? And so I think he had a real respect for the amateur player. He was a very loyal and dedicated PGA club professional. I think he always identified with club professionals. But then I think he was able to, you know, move into the next level of this golf instructor that becomes kind of a business entity, you know, with the Golf Digest schools.
Right.
But through all that, you know, Jim never lost his that personal touch. He never lost his roots, kind of that Hoosier roots, you know. Yeah. He just never lost it, and I think that's what made Jim kind of appealing. Sometimes the modern day teacher becomes a little distant, you know. It's kind of like the player themselves. Do they have an agent? Yeah, now they have agents. Even these teachers have agents, and sometimes, you know, we've even had difficulty over the years attracting some of the top teachers because we got to go through an agent, and they want their cut, and they deserve it, but it gets kind of expensive. You know, what's great about working with Jim and, of course, with Boyne, we're dealing directly with Jim Flick. Right. You know, we're not dealing with some corporate, some agent out of New York. That's the way he'd like to do things. And matter of fact, I know that Carolyn Alt, you know, he told, I think Carolyn was one of the first persons to tell Carolyn that he had pancreatic cancer and he would not be able to come back to the show this year. He was signed by Carolyn in September, and he was planning to be our headliner for our 25th anniversary, which I thought would have been so appropriate. But he told Carolyn that he found out he had incurable pancreatic cancer, and you know, it was a real devastating blow to hear that. And he asked us to keep it in confidence for a couple weeks until he formally told some people, including his longtime student Tom Lehman. And luckily, Tom did get a chance to pass his respects to Jim, and when Jim was in hospice, but he passed away in November. But it was you know, a real loss. We would have loved to have had him back for the 25th anniversary. I still remember, I always tell people, who are the two biggest draws we've ever had in the history of the golf show? Jim Flick and Rick Smith. Yeah, but Jim Flick was right there. He packed that. He packed every seat we had. Yeah.
Well, it was a relief to come up here to a little winter, you know, for winter
right.
from his youth.
Yeah.
He would have loved this,
That's
right?
right, yeah.
I think.
No problem.
I'm not sure.
Yeah.
We were pretty excited to, you know, have Jim coming here to the West Michigan Golf Show this year. And I remember he called me and said, you know, I have the honor to be the headline speaker and teacher at the 25th anniversary of the West Michigan Golf Show. And he said, Brian, would you go on stage with me and do the seminars? And I said, Jim, absolutely I would. And so I was really looking forward to that. Obviously, when he took ill, it was, you know, obviously everyone knew what was going to happen at that point. But, you know, thinking about his legacy, this is really what this is all about. And I think you probably read the same things I've read about it. And I think it was worded very nicely. It was in Golf Digest, I believe. And, you know, his legacy is art that was painted by his kids, and his kids are the juniors. And Lehman said it best, the last 15 years of Jim's career, I think he was teaching 90% juniors and maybe 10%, you know, adults, and Jim loved it. Being 80, 82 years old, he told me it made him feel young. You know, I think his more famous student, Bo Hostler, you know, contended in the U.S. Open and through 3 rounds, and you know, I called Jim Friday, I guess, after the 2nd round. And I said, Jim, what the heck did you tell Bo? He says, can you believe this? And he was so excited on the phone, I could just hear him walking around the living room all happy and excited. You know, it was neat. And the other memory I have as it relates to juniors is I was lucky enough to have one of my students qualify for the U.S. Amateur at the age of 17. I believe he was the 3rd youngest to qualify at that time. It was Joey Garber. And Jim had spent some time with Joey as well and helped me with that. And he called me, he says, you know, I know you're famous now, Brian, because you have, you know, one of the youngest, but my student is 14 years old and he is the youngest, and that was Bo Hostler at the time. And so it was pretty fun ribbing back and forth. But I think Jim wants to be remembered for teaching juniors and his kids, and you know, at the private memorial service that they had for him out at TaylorMade, Lehman and Mark King unveiled the Jim Flick Junior Golf Foundation, which is focused after his kids that he's been teaching, so they can continue learning, and then from there we'll build it. But after the ceremony was over, it was like a huddle at a football game. You know, there's Malaska, Tom Lehman, you know, myself, and a bunch of the top, you know, 20 instructors in the world there, just talking about what they're going to do with the Jim Flick Junior Golf Foundation. So that's really where his honor is, and I think that's where he would want to be remembered.
So we've been talking about the late Jim Flick, who is one of the outstanding teachers and had a nice Michigan background of being a long time in the summers up at Boyne Highlands.
I've been probably the luckiest guy that this planet's known in so many ways.